I never thought I'd be afraid of my own son's shadow. Never imagined I'd check my food for strange tastes or hide my medicine where he couldn't find it. But that's what happens when you realize the person you love most in this world wants you dead before your time. My name is Evelyn Grace Johnson, and at 72 years old, I thought I'd seen everything life could throw at a person. I've buried a husband, worked my fingers raw in textile factories, and raised a son all on my own in our little house on Maple Street in Cleveland, Ohio. I've weathered storms that would have broken a weaker woman. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what my own flesh and blood tried to do to me. It started with little things, as the worst troubles often do. A dizzy spell here, a forgetful moment there. At my age, you expect some slowing down, some creaking in the joints, some foggy mornings when the coffee takes longer to clear your head. So when Richard, my Rick, suggested I see a doctor, it seemed like he was just being a good son. A concerned son. The kind of son I'd raised him to be. "Mom, you're not getting any younger," he'd say, his lawyer voice all smooth and reasonable while he'd straighten the pillows behind my back. "We need to make sure you're well taken care of." Taken care of. Lord, if I'd only known what those words really meant coming from his mouth. I raised that boy on a seamstress's wages after his daddy's heart gave out when Rick was just 12 years old. Worked double shifts at the textile factory, then came home and took in mending jobs that kept me up till midnight, hunched over my old Singer sewing machine, the pedal worn smooth from use. My hands would cramp so bad sometimes I'd have to soak them in warm water just to straighten my fingers in the morning. But I did it gladly. Did it so Rick could have the things other kids had, the right clothes, the school trips, the college education his daddy and I had dreamed of for him. And he'd made good. Harvard Law School, if you can believe it. My boy, who used to run around in patches I'd sewn onto his jeans, walking those fancy halls, I nearly burst with pride at his graduation. Stood there in my Sunday best, a dress I'd made myself from a butterick pattern, and cried like a baby when they called his name. Richard Alexander Johnson, Juris Doctor. I thought I'd done something right in this world after all. For years that seemed true. Rick built himself a fine career at a big law firm downtown. He'd visit every Sunday for dinner, always bringing me something nice. Flowers or a box of those chocolate-covered cherries I love. He'd tell me about his cases, the parts he could share anyway, and I'd nod like I understood all those fancy legal terms. We had a good relationship, or so I thought, as good as any mother and son. Then came my 70th birthday. Rick threw me a party at his fancy downtown condo, invited my church friends, the neighbors, even a few of the ladies I used to work with at the factory before it closed down. He made a beautiful speech about how I'd sacrificed everything for him, how he owed his success to my hard work. "And now," he said, raising his glass of champagne that cost more than I used to make in a week, "it's my turn to take care of you, Mom." Everyone applauded. Mrs. Lewis from next door squeezed my hand and whispered, "You're so lucky to have such a devoted son." I nodded, tears in my eyes, feeling like the most fortunate mother in Cleveland. That was the day everything started to change, though I didn't see it then. That was the day my son began to plot against me. That was the day the poison, both literal and figurative, began to seep into my life. Looking back now, I should have noticed the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes when he made that toast. Should have paid attention to how quickly he changed the subject when one of my friends asked if I'd be moving in with him now that I was getting older. Should have wondered why a man who made the kind of money he did was suddenly so interested in my modest savings and the little house I'd paid off 20 years ago. But love is blind, they say, and a mother's love might be the blindest of all. I didn't see what was right in front of me until it was almost too late. Until the day I found that little plastic baggie hidden in the back of his desk drawer while I was putting away his freshly ironed shirts. The day everything I thought I knew about my son, my pride and joy, my reason for living, came crashing down around me. I still remember how my hands trembled as I held that baggie up to the light, examining the white powder inside. How my heart seemed to stop in my chest as the terrible truth dawned on me. How the floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet as I realized what it meant. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand how we got there. How a mother's love turned to fear. How I came to do something I never thought I'd have to do to my own son. Cleveland in the 1950s was a different world from what you young folks know today. The steel mills were still running full tilt, sending clouds of smoke into the sky that would sometimes turn the snow gray before it even hit the ground. But there was a certain pride in the air, too. We were making things, building America, raising our families in neighborhoods where everybody knew your name and your business. I met Thomas Johnson at a church social in the summer of '54. He was handsome as the day is long, with dark hair that had a slight curl to it, and blue eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He worked at Republic Steel then, coming home with his lunch pail and that particular smell of metal and honest sweat that clung to the men who worked the mills. We were married 6 months later, in a simple ceremony at First Baptist with a reception in my parents' backyard. I wore my mother's dress, altered to fit my smaller frame, and carried a bouquet of daisies tied with a blue ribbon. We were happy, Tommy and me. Not rich by any stretch, but comfortable enough in our little house on Maple Street. We saved for 2 years to buy our first television set, a bulky Philco with a screen no bigger than a dinner plate. I remember how we'd sit together on the sofa every Sunday night to watch The Ed Sullivan Show, the room dark except for the bluish glow of the screen, Tommy's arm around my shoulders, and a bowl of popcorn between us. When I found out I was expecting in the spring of '57, Tommy painted the spare bedroom pale blue, convinced we were having a boy. Johnson men always father sons, he'd say, puffing out his chest with pride. It's in our blood. Turns out he was right. Richard Alexander Johnson came screaming into this world on a snowy November morning, all red-faced and indignant, like he was already objecting to something. From the start, Rick was special. Smart as a whip, talking in full sentences before most babies his age had gotten beyond mama and dada. Tommy would come home from his shift and scoop that boy up, tossing him in the air until my heart nearly stopped. Rick's laughter ringing through our little house like bells. "This boy's going places, Evie," Tommy would say, his face serious despite the joy in his eyes. "He's not going to spend his life in the mills like his old man. We're going to make sure of that." We started a college fund when Rick was still in diapers, putting away a few dollars from each paycheck even when it meant going without. Tommy took on extra shifts whenever he could, and I started taking in mending work from the neighbors. Hemming pants, patching elbows, darning socks that most folks these days would just throw away. Rick was just 12 when the call came. Tommy had collapsed on the factory floor. Massive heart attack, they said. Dead before the ambulance even arrived. I remember standing in our kitchen, the black telephone receiver clutched in my hand, wondering how I was supposed to keep breathing when it felt like all the air had been sucked out of the world. The funeral is a blur in my memory. A sea of somber faces, casseroles piling up in our kitchen, Rick in his too big suit standing stiff and confused beside me at the graveside. That night, after everyone had gone and the house was finally quiet, I found him sitting on his bed, holding his father's pocket watch. "Are we going to be okay, Mom?" he asked, his voice small in the darkness. "Yes, baby," I told him, though I had no earthly idea how I'd keep that promise. "We're going to be just fine." And somehow we were. I got a full-time job at Manning Textiles, running industrial sewing machines from 7 to 3:30. Then I'd come home, fix dinner for Rick, help with his homework, and take in mending work that kept me up until midnight most nights. My hands would cramp something terrible, but I'd just soak them in hot water and get back to it. What choice did I have? Sundays were our special time. I'd get up early to make cinnamon rolls from scratch, Tommy's mother's recipe, and we'd eat them warm from the oven while listening to the church service on the radio. Afterward, if the weather was nice, we'd walk down to Lake Erie, Rick skipping stones across the water while I sat on a bench, giving my tired feet a rest and watching the gulls wheel overhead. As Rick got older, he showed just how smart he really was. Straight A's all through school, president of the debate club, editor of the school newspaper. His teachers all said the same thing. That boy's going somewhere. Just like Tommy had predicted. When Rick got accepted to Harvard Law School, I cried for an hour straight. Cried for the joy of seeing my son reach so high. Cried for Tommy, who didn't live to see his dreams for our boy come true. And yes, cried a little for the lonely years ahead with Rick so far away. "Don't worry, Mom," he said, hugging me tight the night before he left for Cambridge. "I'm going to make you proud, and when I'm a big-shot lawyer, I'm going to take care of you the way you've always taken care of me." I believed him with all my heart. Why wouldn't I? He was my son, my whole world. The living embodiment of every sacrifice, every late night, every missed opportunity I'd gladly surrendered for his sake. The years Rick was away at school were quiet ones. I'd wait by the mailbox for his letters, save up for months so I could call him on his birthday. When he'd come home for Christmas, the house would feel alive again, filled with his stories, his laughter, his big plans for the future. I kept working at the textile factory until it closed in '89, then found a job at a dry cleaner's where I did alterations. By then, Rick had graduated and gotten a position at Hargrove, Mitchell & Lewis, one of the biggest law firms in Cleveland. He wanted me to retire, said he could help with money if I needed it, but I wasn't ready to be idle. Work had been my companion for too long. "At least let me fix up the house," he insisted, and that I did accept. He hired people to put on a new roof, replace the old furnace, lay new linoleum in the kitchen. Every improvement made with an eye toward keeping me comfortable and safe in my old age. Or so I thought at the time. Looking back now, I wonder if he was already calculating the property value, already planning how to turn my modest home into cash once I was out of the picture. But that's getting ahead in the story. Back then, all I saw was a successful son who hadn't forgotten where he came from. A good boy making good on his promises. Rick's rise in the legal world was something to behold. Within 5 years at Hargrove, Mitchell & Lewis, he made junior partner, the youngest in the firm's history, he told me proudly. I didn't fully understand what that meant, but I knew it was important by the way his chest puffed up when he said it, just like his daddy's used to when he'd talk about the Johnson men. I attended the celebration dinner they held at some fancy restaurant downtown where the menu didn't even have prices listed. Rick insisted I sit at the head table with the senior partners and their wives, all of them in clothes that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. I wore my best dress, navy blue with little white flowers, and a strand of fake pearls Rick had given me for Christmas years before. "Mrs. Johnson," one of the senior partners said to me, swirling amber liquid in a crystal glass, "you must be very proud of your son. He's got a brilliant legal mind." "Oh, I am," I told him, trying not to fidget with my napkin. Though I can't take credit for the legal part. That boy was arguing cases before he could tie his shoes. Once talked me into letting him stay up an hour past bedtime with a 3-point presentation on why it would enhance his academic performance. He was 8. Everyone at the table laughed, and Rick smiled, though I noticed a tightness around his eyes that hadn't been there before. Later, in the car as he drove me home, he said, "Mom, maybe don't tell stories like that about me at work functions, okay? It's important that the partners see me as professional." "I'm sorry, honey," I said, feeling like I'd somehow let him down. I was just so proud I couldn't help myself. He reached over and patted my hand. "I know, Mom. It's fine. Just for next time." There were lots of next times over the following years, little corrections to my behavior that seemed reasonable enough on their own. Don't call his office unless it's an emergency. Don't mention where he grew up to his fancy friends. Don't talk about the textile factory or my work at the dry cleaners. It was like he was polishing me up, the way you might polish an old piece of silver that's got a bit tarnished, trying to make me presentable for his new life. When Rick turned 40, he bought himself a sleek condo in one of those glass towers downtown with a view of Lake Erie. The first time I visited, I felt like I was walking into one of those homes in the magazines at the doctor's office. All clean lines and shiny surfaces, nothing out of place. Not a speck of dust anywhere, though he was hardly ever home to clean it, working the long hours lawyers do. "It's beautiful, Ricky," I said, using the nickname he'd outgrown years ago, "but it doesn't look very lived in." He gave me that tight smile again. "That's the point, Mom. It's minimalist, contemporary." I nodded like I understood, though in truth it made me sad to think of my son coming home to such a cold, impersonal space after long days at the office. No wonder he was still single. What woman would want to live in a place with no softness, no warmth? Around this time, Rick started taking a more active interest in my affairs. He'd always been concerned, of course, calling regularly, visiting most Sundays for dinner. But suddenly, he wanted to know about my finances, my health, my will. "Have you thought about what you want to happen to the house when you're gone, Mom?" he asked one Sunday over the pot roast I'd spent all afternoon preparing. "Well, it would go to you, of course," I said, surprised by the question. "You're my only child." "Yes, but there's the matter of probate, estate taxes, all that legal red tape." He waved his hand dismissively, as if these concerns were mere technicalities. "It might be simpler if we put the house in my name now. I could set up a life estate for you. You'd still live here as long as you want, but legally, it would be mine." I must have looked confused because he quickly added, "It's just a way to avoid complications later. A lot of my clients do it with their elderly parents. It's very standard." Elderly. The word stung, though I was 68 at the time, and I suppose it fit. Still, something about the conversation made me uneasy. The house on Maple Street was my anchor, the one constant in a changing world. Tommy and I had bought it as newlyweds. I'd raised Rick there. Every corner held memories. "I don't know, Ricky," I said slowly. "I'd have to think about it." He didn't push, just nodded and changed the subject, but I noticed a flicker of something in his eyes. Disappointment? Frustration? I couldn't quite name it. The next week, Rick showed up with a young doctor in tow, Dr. Pierce, who looked barely old enough to be out of medical school. Rick explained that Dr. Pierce was a colleague's brother-in-law who specialized in geriatric medicine. "I've been worried about you, Mom," Rick said, his voice gentle but firm. "You seem more forgetful lately, and I've noticed you losing your balance sometimes." Had I been forgetful? Maybe a little, misplacing my glasses, taking longer to recall a neighbor's name. Normal aging, I'd thought. As for balance, well, my arthritis made my knees stiff some mornings, but I hadn't fallen or anything serious. Before I could object, Dr. Pierce was asking me questions, having me walk across the room, checking my blood pressure. He spoke mostly to Rick, as if I wasn't there or couldn't understand. "She's showing some early signs of cognitive decline," he said, scribbling something on a prescription pad. "Not unusual at her age, but we should start her on these medications to slow the progression." Just like that, I had 3 new prescriptions, little pills I was supposed to take morning and night. Rick took charge of filling them, bringing over one of those plastic pill organizers with the days of the week on it. "I'll come by every Sunday to refill it for you," he said. "That way you won't get confused about which pills to take when." I didn't feel confused. I didn't feel like I needed a doctor or prescriptions or my son managing my medications. But Rick seemed so concerned, so sure he was doing what was best for me, that I went along with it. After all, he was the educated one, the successful one. Maybe he saw things in me that I couldn't see in myself. That was the beginning of Rick inserting himself into every aspect of my life. The beginning of me doubting my own mind, my own capabilities. The beginning of the slow poison that was seeping into not just my body, but our relationship. I just didn't know it yet. The changes came on so gradually that at first I didn't connect them to the new pills. I'd wake up feeling foggy, like my brain was wrapped in cotton wool. My hands would tremble sometimes, making it hard to thread a needle, a real problem for a woman who'd been sewing since she was 8 years old. I'd get dizzy spells that would send me grabbing for the nearest chair. Worst of all was the confusion. Moments when I couldn't remember what day it was or whether I'd already taken my morning pills. "It's just age, Mom," Rick would say whenever I mentioned these symptoms. Dr. Pierce said to expect some good days and bad days. The medication will help stabilize things. But I didn't feel stabilized. I felt like I was slowly disappearing, bit by bit, day by day. Rick started coming around more often, not just Sundays for dinner, but weeknights too. He'd bring groceries, check my pill organizer, look through my mail. At first, I was touched by his attentiveness, my successful son taking time out of his busy schedule to care for his old mother. What more could a parent ask for? Then he suggested I give him power of attorney. "It's just a precaution," he explained, sliding the papers across my kitchen table one evening. "In case you have an episode and can't make decisions for yourself. This way, I can handle things for you. Pay your bills, talk to your doctors, make sure everything's taken care of." I stared at the legal document, the words swimming before my eyes. Power of attorney. Such an innocent-sounding phrase for something that would give my son complete control over my life. "I don't know, Ricky," I said, pushing the papers back toward him. "I'm not that bad off yet. I can still pay my own bills and talk to my own doctors." His face darkened for just a moment before he smoothed his expression back into one of patient concern. "Of course you can, Mom. Now. But we need to plan for the future. Remember last week when you forgot to pay the electric bill? And the time before that when you couldn't remember the name of your blood pressure medication when the pharmacy called? Had those things happened? Maybe. The days had started to blur together, and my memory wasn't what it used to be. Still, signing away my independence felt like a step I wasn't ready to take. "Let me think about it," I said, which had become my standard response to Rick's suggestions. He sighed but nodded, tucking the papers back into his briefcase. "Whatever you're comfortable with, Mom. I just want what's best for you." That night, as I was getting ready for bed, the phone rang. It was Martha Lewis from next door, calling to check on me. Martha and I had been neighbors for almost 30 years, ever since she and her late husband bought the house after their children were grown. She was a few years younger than me, but had become a good friend, especially since my retirement. "Haven't seen you at church the past couple Sundays," she said. "Everything okay over there?" "Just feeling a bit under the weather," I told her, though in truth, I couldn't remember why I'd missed church. Had Rick suggested I stay home? Had I not felt up to it? The gaps in my memory frightened me more than I wanted to admit. "That son of yours has been around a lot lately," Martha commented. "Nice to see him taking such good care of you." "Yes," I agreed automatically. "Rick's been a big help." There was a pause on the line. "Evelyn," Martha said finally, her voice lower now, more serious. "You'd tell me if something wasn't right, wouldn't you? If you needed help?" The question caught me off guard. "Of course," I said. "But everything's fine. Really." After we hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed, Martha's question echoing in my mind. Would I tell her if something wasn't right? Would I even know? These days, I seemed to be second-guessing everything. My memory, my judgment, my own senses. The next morning, Rick showed up unexpectedly with Dr. Pierce in tow again. This time, the doctor barely greeted me before starting his examination, listening to my heart, checking my reflexes, asking me questions that seemed designed to highlight my confusion rather than assess my health. "She's deteriorating faster than I expected," he told Rick, again speaking as if I wasn't in the room. "We should adjust her medication." Just like that, new pills appeared in my organizer, different shapes, different colors. When I asked what they were for, Rick rattled off explanations that went over my head, something about cognitive function and neurological support. Medical jargon that meant nothing to me but sounded impressive, authoritative. The new pills made things worse. I'd fall asleep in my chair in the middle of the day. Sometimes I'd wake up and hours had passed, though it felt like minutes. I started having vivid dreams, or were they hallucinations, of Tommy sitting at the foot of my bed, warning me about something I couldn't quite understand. One afternoon, I was in the kitchen trying to follow a recipe for banana bread, something I'd made 100 times before, when I suddenly couldn't remember what came next. I stood there, staring at the ingredients on the counter, feeling tears of frustration well up in my eyes. That's when I noticed a document on the kitchen table that hadn't been there earlier. Rick must have left it when he'd stopped by that morning to check on me. It was from my bank, a statement for an account I didn't recognize, an account in both my name and Rick's. As I squinted at the numbers, trying to make sense of them, I realized with a jolt that it showed regular transfers from my personal savings, the money I'd put aside over decades of careful living, into this joint account. With shaking hands, I opened the drawer where I kept my own bank statements. They weren't there. In fact, I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen them. Had Rick been taking my mail, managing my finances without telling me? My confusion gave way to a cold, creeping fear. Something wasn't right. This wasn't just age or forgetfulness or the natural progression of some illness. This felt deliberate, orchestrated. That evening, when Rick came by with more groceries and yet another adjustment to my pills, I watched him with new eyes. The way he moved around my house as if it were already his. The practiced concern in his voice that never quite reached his eyes. The careful way he made sure I took my evening medication while he was there to witness it. "Good girl," he said when I swallowed the pills, as if I were a child or a pet performing a trick. "These new ones should help you feel more like yourself." But as I looked at my son, my pride and joy, the center of my world for so many years, I had the terrible feeling that I was only just beginning to see him for what he truly was, and it terrified me. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. After Rick called to check that I'd taken my morning pills, which I assured him I had, I went to the bathroom, bent over the toilet, and stuck my finger down my throat until I brought them back up. It was a horrible thing to do, messy and undignified, but a voice inside me, a voice that sounded suspiciously like Tommy's, was screaming that something was very wrong. Once my stomach was empty, I cleaned myself up and sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of tea, trying to think clearly for the first time in weeks. The fog that had been clouding my mind seemed less dense without the morning dose of pills. Not gone completely. Whatever was happening to me had been building for some time, but lessened enough that I could string thoughts together more easily. What did I know for certain? Rick was giving me medication prescribed by a doctor I'd met only twice. My health was deteriorating rapidly. My finances were being merged with Rick's without my clear consent, and my son, my only child, was behaving in ways that increasingly seemed less like concern and more like control. I needed to see what was in those pills. With trembling hands, I opened the pill organizer that sat on my kitchen counter. Today's compartment was empty now, of course, but tomorrow's contained the usual assortment: 2 large white capsules, 1 small blue pill, and a round yellow tablet. I emptied them into my palm, studying them carefully. No markings I could read, nothing to indicate what they might contain. I needed help. Martha would know what to do. She'd been a nurse before retirement, worked for years at Metro Health. If anyone could identify mysterious pills, it would be her. I was about to get up and go next door when a thought stopped me cold. What if Rick came back while I was gone? He did that sometimes, dropped by unexpectedly to check on me. If he found the pill organizer empty, he'd know something was up. Instead, I carefully returned all but one of the pills to the organizer. The small blue one I wrapped in a tissue and tucked into my housecoat pocket. Then I called Martha. "Could you come over for coffee?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "It's been too long since we had a proper visit." Bless Martha. She was at my door 20 minutes later with a coffee cake she'd baked herself. We sat at my kitchen table, making small talk about the neighborhood, the weather, the upcoming church bake sale. I waited until we were on our second cups of coffee before I pulled the tissue from my pocket and carefully unfolded it, revealing the blue pill. "Martha," I said quietly, "do you have any idea what this might be?" She frowned, picking up the pill and examining it closely. "Where did you get this, Evelyn?" "It's one of the medications Rick's doctor prescribed for me. For my cognitive issues. I hesitated, then decided to trust her completely. Martha, I think something strange is happening. I've been feeling worse and worse since starting these pills. And Rick's been different. Controlling. I'm scared. Martha's face grew serious. She set the pill down carefully and reached across the table to take my hands in hers. Evelyn Grace Johnson, I have known you for 30 years, and there is nothing wrong with your mind that can't be explained by being 72 and dealing with a lot of stress. I've been worried about you. We all have at church. The way you've withdrawn, the confusion you sometimes show, but I never thought. What? I prompted when she trailed off. What didn't you think? Martha sighed heavily. I didn't want to say anything because I know how much you love your son. But the way he's taken over your life recently reminded me of something I saw too often as a nurse. Elder abuse. The words hit me like a physical blow. Elder abuse. That happened to other people. Neglected nursing home residents, seniors with bad children who stole their Social Security checks. Not to me. Not from Rick. That's a serious accusation, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Yes, it is, Martha agreed. And I hope I'm wrong. But, Evelyn, think about it. You were fine, active, clear-headed, independent, until Rick started bringing that doctor around and giving you all these medications. Now suddenly you're confused, weak, and he's taking control of your finances and trying to get your house put in his name. It's a pattern I've seen before. Put that way, it did sound suspicious. But still, this was Rick we were talking about. My son. The boy I'd raised alone, sacrificed everything for. What about the pill? I asked, steering us back to more concrete ground. Do you recognize it? Martha shook her head. Not specifically, no, but I can find out. My son-in-law is a pharmacist. I could have him look at it. I nodded, relieved to have a plan. Please, as soon as possible. After Martha left with the pill carefully secured in her purse, I tried to go about my normal routine. I dusted the living room, started a load of laundry, defrosted chicken for dinner. But my mind was racing, connecting dots I'd been too foggy to see before. The timing of my decline. The way Rick seemed to have answers ready before I even asked questions. The convenient appearance of Dr. Pierce, whom I'd never heard of before Rick brought him to my door. The papers Rick kept trying to get me to sign. And something else, something that had been nagging at the edges of my memory for weeks, but that I hadn't been able to fully recall until now. A conversation I'd overheard at church months ago, before all this started. Two women discussing the sudden death of Harriet Miller, an elderly widow who lived alone on the other side of the neighborhood. Such a shame, one had said, and right after she signed her house over to her nephew too. The one who's a lawyer? The other had asked. Isn't he a friend of your son's? That's right, Richard Johnson. They were at law school together. He handled the paperwork for Harriet's nephew, I think. Richard Johnson, my son. Handling paperwork that transferred a house from an elderly woman to her relative, shortly before her unexpected death. A coincidence, surely. It had to be. I'd raised a good boy, a moral man who helped people with legal matters because that was his job. That's all it was. But as I stood at my kitchen window, watching the afternoon light fade to evening, a chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the autumn air outside. What if I was wrong? What if the son I thought I knew, the boy I'd raised to be honest and good, had become someone capable of what? Drugging his own mother? Stealing her money? Worse? I didn't want to believe it. Every fiber of my being rejected the possibility. But as the shadows lengthened across my kitchen floor, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was running out of time to find the truth. Martha called the next morning, her voice tight with urgency. Evelyn, are you alone? Can you talk? Yes, I said, glancing nervously at the clock. It was just past 9. Rick wouldn't be by until evening with his usual bag of groceries and concerned questions about my day. What is it? What did you find out? My son-in-law looked at the pill, Martha said, lowering her voice as if someone might be listening. It's not any standard medication for cognitive issues or memory problems. In fact, it's not something that would normally be prescribed to someone your age at all. My hand tightened on the phone. What is it, Martha? It's a powerful sedative, Evelyn, the kind they give to patients with severe psychiatric conditions. Combined with certain other medications, it can cause confusion, memory loss, dizziness, all the symptoms you've been experiencing. The room seemed to tilt around me, and I had to grip the kitchen counter to steady myself. Are you saying Rick is drugging me? Deliberately making me sick? I don't know for sure, Martha admitted, but nothing about this looks right. My son-in-law was very concerned when I described your situation. He said this combination of medications could be dangerous for someone your age, potentially fatal over time. Fatal. The word hung in the air between us, unthinkable yet impossible to unhear. My own son, my flesh and blood, giving me drugs that could kill me? It couldn't be true. And yet, a cold certainty was forming in the pit of my stomach. What should I do? I whispered. First, stop taking the pills, Martha said firmly. All of them. Then we need to gather evidence. My son-in-law suggested we keep samples of each medication, and we should document everything, when Rick visits, what he says, any paperwork he brings over. And then what? I asked, a tremor in my voice. Then we go to the police, Evelyn. If what we suspect is true, your son is committing a crime. Elder abuse, financial exploitation, possibly attempted... She couldn't bring herself to say the word. Murder. My son might be trying to murder me. The thought was so monstrous I could barely hold it in my mind. I need to be sure, I said. Before I accuse my own son of something so terrible, I need to be absolutely certain. I understand, Martha replied, but in the meantime, you need to be careful. If Rick realizes you're not taking the medication or that you suspect something... She didn't need to finish the thought. We both knew what she meant. If Rick was capable of slowly poisoning me, what else might he do if cornered? After hanging up, I went to the bathroom and emptied all the pills from my organizer down the toilet, watching them swirl away. Then I sat on the edge of the tub and wept, for the son I thought I had, for the betrayal that cut deeper than any knife, for the innocence I'd never get back. But tears wouldn't save me. Pulling myself together, I began searching the house for any evidence of what Rick was doing. I started in the kitchen, going through drawers I hadn't properly examined in months. In the back of the junk drawer, I found a stack of mail, bank statements, utility bills, letters from my insurance company, all unopened, all addressed to me. Rick had been intercepting my mail, keeping me from seeing my own financial information. Next, I checked the small desk in my living room where I'd always kept important papers. The drawer was nearly empty now, just a few old birthday cards and a recipe book. My will, my deed to the house, my life insurance policy, all gone. When had Rick taken them? How had I not noticed? In my bedroom, I discovered more evidence of his interference. My jewelry box had been rearranged, the good pieces, the pearl necklace Tommy had given me on our 10th anniversary, the diamond earrings that had been my mother's, nowhere to be found. Not terribly valuable in the grand scheme of things, but family treasures nonetheless. By mid-afternoon, a picture was emerging that I could no longer deny. Rick had been systematically taking control of every aspect of my life, my health, my finances, my property, even my precious mementos. The fog of medication had kept me from seeing the full scope of his betrayal until now. But why? What could possibly drive a son to do this to his mother? The answer, I suspected, was as old as time itself: money. My house, though modest, was worth something, especially the land it sat on, in a neighborhood that had become increasingly desirable as Cleveland underwent its urban renaissance. My savings, while not extravagant, represented a lifetime of careful frugality. My life insurance policy, which Tommy had insisted on taking out all those years ago, would pay out a tidy sum upon my death. Put together, it might amount to a few $100,000, a fortune to me, who had lived simply all my life. But to Rick, with his expensive condo and designer suits and lavish lifestyle, perhaps it was just enough to cover debts I knew nothing about, or to fund ambitions he'd never shared with his simple working-class mother. The thought made me sick to my stomach. Had it all been a lie? The devoted son, the successful lawyer who'd made good on his father's dreams, the man who'd promised to take care of me in my old age, had that all been a performance, a mask worn until the right moment came to reveal the truth? I thought back over the years, searching for signs I might have missed. Had there always been this coldness in him, this calculation, hidden beneath the surface? Or had something changed him, the pressure of his high-powered job, perhaps, or debts, or the influence of the wealthy, cutthroat world he moved in now? It didn't matter. Whatever the reason, my son had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible, and I had to protect myself. When the doorbell rang at 5:30, I was ready. I'd washed my face, combed my hair, and put on a cardigan to hide how much weight I'd lost in recent weeks. I wanted to look as normal as possible, as unsuspecting as possible. When I opened the door to see Rick standing there with his usual grocery bag and concerned smile, it took everything in me not to recoil. "Hi, Mom," he said, stepping inside and kissing my cheek. "How are you feeling today?" I forced myself to smile back. "Oh, you know, good days and bad days. Today's not too bad." He studied my face for a moment, and I wondered if he could see the change in me, the clarity returning to my eyes, the suspicion I was trying so hard to hide. If he noticed anything, he didn't show it. "Great," he said, heading for the kitchen. "I brought your favorites, pot roast for dinner and those little lemon cookies you like for dessert." I followed him, watching as he unpacked the groceries with practiced efficiency. When he reached for my pill organizer, my heart began to race. "Let's make sure you take your evening medication," he said, filling a glass with water. Then he frowned, noticing the empty compartments. "Mom, did you take all your pills for the week already?" The moment of truth had arrived sooner than I'd expected. I had to make a split-second decision: confront him now or continue the charade. "No," I said, the single word feeling like a stone in my throat. "I flushed them." Rick froze, the empty pill organizer in his hand. For a moment, the kitchen was so quiet I could hear the old Seth Thomas clock ticking in the living room, marking the seconds of this terrible new reality. "You what?" His voice was soft, controlled, but with an edge I recognized from when he was a teenager trying to hide his anger. "Mom, why would you do that? Those are your medications. You need them." I clasped my hands together to stop them from shaking. "No, Ricky, I don't. I've never needed them." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise? Calculation? A quickly suppressed flash of panic. Then his lawyer face slid back into place, all concerned frowns and reasonable tones. "Mom, you're confused. Dr. Pierce prescribed those medications for your condition. Without them, your symptoms will get worse. The confusion, the memory problems, they'll all come back, maybe even stronger than before." I almost laughed, a bitter sound that caught in my throat. That's funny, because I've felt clearer today than I have in months. Ever since I stopped taking those pills, the fog's been lifting. Rick set the pill organizer down carefully, like a man trying not to startle a wild animal. "I think we should call Dr. Pierce. Clearly something's wrong if you're having these delusions." Delusions? Now I did laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Is that what you call it when someone figures out they're being poisoned?" The word hung in the air between us, ugly and undeniable. Rick's face went completely still, a mask that revealed nothing. But his eyes, his eyes told me everything I needed to know. They were cold, calculating, assessing the threat I now posed to whatever plan he'd set in motion. "Poisoned?" he repeated, injecting just the right note of concern into his voice. "Mom, listen to yourself. This is exactly why you need your medication. You're having paranoid thoughts. I'm your son. I'm trying to help you." Help me into an early grave? I asked, taking a step back from him. Help yourself to my house, my savings, my insurance? His expression hardened almost imperceptibly. You don't know what you're saying. You're sick. I was sick, I corrected him. Sick from whatever you've been giving me. But I'm getting better now. Martha's son-in-law identified that blue pill, by the way. It's not for dementia or cognitive issues. It's a heavy-duty sedative that could kill someone my age if combined with certain other medications. Medications like the ones you've been so carefully making sure I take. Rick's professional composure slipped for just a moment, revealing a flash of something ugly underneath. Then he sighed heavily, adopting the patient tone one might use with a difficult child. Martha Lewis? That busybody from next door? Mom, she's filling your head with nonsense. She's not a doctor. Her son-in-law isn't your doctor. Dr. Pierce is the medical professional here, and he prescribed those medications for a reason. Dr. Pierce, I repeated. Your friend's brother-in-law, who I'd never heard of before you brought him to my door. The doctor who spoke to you instead of me, who never once asked about my medical history or had me come to his office for proper tests. That Dr. Pierce? Rick's jaw tightened. He glanced at his watch, then at the door, like he was calculating his next move. I could almost see the gears turning behind his eyes, the legal mind formulating arguments, counter-arguments, strategies. I think you need to rest, he said finally. You're working yourself up over nothing. We can talk about this tomorrow when you're calmer. He took a step toward me, hand outstretched as if to guide me to a chair, and I flinched away instinctively. Something dark flashed across his face. Frustration, anger, determination. Don't touch me, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I want you to leave now, Rick. I want you to go home and not come back unless I call you. He laughed, a sharp sound with no warmth in it. You're kicking me out? Your own son? The person who's been taking care of you? Mom, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life, I told him, wishing my voice wouldn't quaver so. Please go. Instead of leaving, he moved toward the living room, glancing at the desk where I'd discovered my missing papers. I'm not going anywhere until we sort this out. You're clearly not thinking clearly. In fact, I'm starting to think you might need more specialized care. Somewhere with trained staff who can monitor you properly. A chill ran through me. He was talking about putting me in a home, somewhere he could control access to me completely, somewhere Martha couldn't check on me or help me. No, I said, following him into the living room. I'm staying right here in my house. Your house, Rick said, turning to face me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Actually, Mom, if you look at the deed now, you'll see this house is already in my name. You signed it over to me months ago. Don't you remember? Another example of your memory issues, I'm afraid. I felt like the floor was dropping out from under me. I never signed anything. You're lying. Am I? He asked, his voice silky smooth now, the voice he probably used in courtrooms to intimidate witnesses. The paperwork says otherwise. Your signature is on it, witnessed and notarized, and given your confused state. Who do you think people will believe? A respected attorney or an elderly woman with documented cognitive decline? In that moment, looking at my son's face, the face I'd kissed goodnight thousands of times, the face I'd watched grow from baby to boy to man, I saw nothing of the child I'd raised. This was a stranger wearing my son's features, a predator who had been circling me, waiting for the right moment to strike. You won't get away with this, I said, though my voice sounded small even to my own ears. Martha knows. Her son-in-law knows. If anything happens to me— Martha Lewis? Rick interrupted, his tone dismissive. The widow with the heart condition? The one whose children have been trying to convince her to move to assisted living for years? She's hardly a reliable witness, Mom. The implicit threat sent ice through my veins. Martha. Had he already been planning what to do about Martha? Was she in danger too, because she'd tried to help me? I don't know what Rick saw in my face then, fear, realization, horror, but something made him decide to end our confrontation. He sighed, glancing at his watch again. "I have to go," he said, his tone suddenly brisk and professional. "I have a dinner meeting, but I'll be back tomorrow with Dr. Pierce. We'll sort this all out then." The meaning was clear. Tomorrow they'd come with more pills, more paperwork, maybe even commitment papers to have me institutionalized. I was out of time. As Rick gathered his coat and briefcase, I followed him to the door, trying to look appropriately cowed and confused. Let him think he'd won this round. Let him think I'd be here waiting tomorrow when he returned to finish what he'd started. "Goodbye, Mom," he said, pausing at the door. For just a second, I thought I saw something like regret flicker across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold mask he wore now. "Get some rest. I'll see you tomorrow." As soon as his car pulled away from the curb, I ran to the phone and dialed Martha's number with shaking fingers. We had to act now. Tonight. Before Rick returned with reinforcements. My son had tried to poison me, had stolen my house out from under me, had likely planned my death. And now I had to do something I never thought I'd have to do to my own flesh and blood. I had to fight back. "Martha, he knows," I gasped into the phone as soon as she answered. "I confronted Rick about the pills, and he threatened me. Said the house is already in his name, that I signed it over. But I never did, Martha. I never signed anything." "Slow down, Evelyn." Martha's voice was calm but urgent. "Are you safe right now? Is he still there?" "No, he left. Said he'd be back tomorrow with that so-called doctor. I think they're planning to have me committed or something worse." My voice broke on the last words, the full weight of my situation crashing down on me. "Listen to me carefully," Martha said. "My nephew Michael is a police officer. He's on duty tonight. I'm going to call him right now and have him come over with a patrol car. Don't open the door for anyone else. Do you understand?" "Yes," I whispered. "Please hurry." After hanging up, I double-checked all the locks on the doors and windows. Then I went to my bedroom and pulled out the old metal lockbox I kept in the back of my closet, the one place Rick hadn't found in his methodical ransacking of my house. Inside was Tommy's service revolver from his time in the Army, along with a few precious mementos Rick hadn't managed to take yet. My original wedding ring, Tommy's dog tags, the deed to our burial plots. I didn't take out the gun. I'd never fired it and honestly wouldn't know how. But just knowing it was there gave me a measure of comfort as I waited for help to arrive. It felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes before I heard a car pull up outside. Peering cautiously through the curtains, I saw a police cruiser with its lights off and felt a rush of relief. Martha had come through. Still, I was cautious as I approached the door. "Who is it?" I called. "Officer Michael Lewis, Mrs. Johnson. Aunt Martha sent me. I have my partner with me, Officer Rivera." I opened the door to find two uniformed police officers standing on my porch, a tall young man with Martha's kind eyes and a serious-looking Latina woman who scanned the street behind them with professional vigilance. "Thank you for coming," I said, my voice shaking with relief as I ushered them inside. I didn't know who else to turn to. "Aunt Martha explained some of what's going on," Officer Lewis said as they followed me to the living room. "But I'd like to hear it directly from you, if that's okay." So I told them everything. The pills, the fake doctor, Rick's systematic takeover of my finances, the missing papers, and finally, his claim that I'd already signed over my house to him. Officer Rivera took detailed notes while Officer Lewis listened with growing concern. When I finished my story, he asked to see the pill organizer and any medication bottles Rick had left. "We'll need to have these analyzed," he said, bagging them carefully. "And I'd like to take photos of your house and any evidence of tampering with your belongings." As they worked, photographing the empty desk drawer, the missing jewelry, the intercepted mail I'd found, I felt a strange sense of unreality. This was my life, my home, my son we were discussing. How had it come to this? "Mrs. Johnson," Officer Rivera said gently, "what you're describing, the medication, the financial control, the property transfer, these are all classic signs of elder abuse and exploitation. It's more common than people realize, and it's taken very seriously by the department. We have a special unit that handles these cases. I never thought, I began, then stopped, unable to finish the thought. I never thought my own son would do this to me. I never thought I'd be a victim. I never thought I'd be sitting in my living room with police officers, building a case against my only child. No one ever does, Officer Lewis said kindly. That's what makes it so effective. The perpetrators count on shame and disbelief to keep their victims quiet. Perpetrators, victims, such cold, clinical terms for what should have been the most sacred of bonds, parent and child. What happens now? I asked. We're going to file a report tonight, Officer Rivera explained. I've already called for a detective from the Elder Abuse Unit to meet us here. They'll want to take a formal statement from you. In the meantime, we can have a patrol car drive by regularly to make sure you're safe. And my house? I asked. Rick claims I signed it over to him, but I know I didn't. We'll look into that right away, Officer Lewis assured me. If he's forged your signature on legal documents, that's fraud, a serious crime. We can put a temporary freeze on any property transfers while this is investigated. Just then, another car pulled up outside. Through the window, I saw Martha hurrying up my front walk, followed by a man in plain clothes who I assumed was the detective. Martha enveloped me in a hug as soon as she entered. I came as soon as I could, she said. Michael called me after he talked to you. Oh, Evelyn, I'm so sorry this is happening. Detective Harrington was a grave-faced man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes that had seen too much. He listened patiently as I repeated my story, asking clarifying questions but never doubting me, never suggesting I might be confused or mistaken. It was a novel experience after months of Rick gaslighting me at every turn. Mrs. Johnson, the detective said when I'd finished, based on what you've told me and the evidence officers Lewis and Rivera have collected, we have enough to open a formal investigation into your son's activities. With your permission, I'd like to request your medical and financial records to build our case. Of course, I said, feeling both relieved and devastated. Whatever you need. There's something else you should consider, he added, his voice gentler now. Given the seriousness of these allegations and the threat your son poses, we can request an emergency protective order. He wouldn't be allowed to contact you or come to your home while the investigation is ongoing. A protective order against my own son. The thought was almost too painful to bear. But then I remembered the cold calculation in Rick's eyes, the implicit threat against Martha, the pills that could have killed me. Yes, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I think that would be best. The next few hours passed in a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and arrangements. Martha insisted on staying with me, calling her daughter to bring an overnight bag. The police took samples of the medications, copies of what little paperwork I still had, and detailed statements from both Martha and me. By midnight, everything that could be done immediately had been done. A patrol car would drive by every hour. The locks on my doors had been checked and reinforced. A case number had been assigned. And somewhere across town, officers were preparing to deliver both the protective order and a search warrant to my son's condo. As Martha made up the guest bed for herself, I sat at my kitchen table, staring into a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. The house felt different now, no longer a trap closing around me, but not quite the safe haven it had once been either. It had been violated, as had my trust, my family bonds, my sense of what was right and true in the world. You should try to get some sleep, Martha said, coming to sit beside me. Tomorrow's going to be another long day. I keep thinking about when Rick was little, I said, not looking up from my tea. How he used to crawl into our bed during thunderstorms, so scared of the lightning. How Tommy would tell him stories until he fell asleep between us, his little hand holding tight to mine. I finally raised my eyes to Martha's. Where did that boy go, Martha? How did he become this stranger who could do such terrible things? Martha covered my hand with hers, her touch warm and reassuring. I don't know, Evelyn. Some people just change. Or maybe they were always different than we thought, and we just couldn't see it. "He's still my son," I whispered, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. "Despite everything, he's still my son." "Yes," Martha agreed softly. "And that's what makes this so hard. But you did the right thing tonight. You protected yourself. You were brave." Brave. The word seemed to belong to someone else, not to a 72-year-old woman who'd spent the evening helping police build a case against her only child. But as I finally went to bed, exhausted beyond words, I realized that perhaps bravery wasn't about feeling strong or certain. Perhaps it was simply about doing what needed to be done, even when your heart was breaking. The sound of cars pulling up outside woke me just after dawn. For a moment, disoriented from sleep, I thought it might be Rick returning as he'd threatened. Then I heard Martha's voice in the hallway, speaking to someone in official tones. I pulled on my robe and shuffled to the living room to find Detective Harrington standing there with another officer I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Johnson," Detective Harrington said, his expression grave. "I'm afraid I have some news. We executed the search warrant at your son's residence last night. The evidence we found, well, it confirms your suspicions and then some." "What did you find?" I asked, sinking into my armchair. "Prescription medications matching what you've been given, but with no legitimate prescriptions. Financial documents, including what appears to be your forged signature on a deed transfer. And notes, Mrs. Johnson. Detailed notes about dosages, your symptoms, timelines." A chill ran through me. Timelines for what? The detective hesitated, exchanging a glance with his colleague. "I believe they were projections for how long the process would take. From initial symptoms to an outcome that would not raise suspicions. My death. My son had been tracking and planning my death with the clinical precision of an accountant preparing tax documents. "We've arrested Richard Johnson," the detective continued. "He's being charged with elder abuse, financial exploitation, forgery, and attempted murder. Given the evidence and the seriousness of the charges, bail will likely be set very high if it's granted at all. You don't need to worry about him coming after you." I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt only a profound, aching emptiness. The son I loved existed now only in my memories. The man in custody was a stranger who happened to share his name and face. "When can I see him?" I asked. Both officers looked startled. "See him?" Detective Harrington repeated. "Mrs. Johnson, given what he's done—" "He's still my son," I said simply. "No matter what he's done, he's still my son." The weeks that followed Rick's arrest were some of the hardest of my life. Harder than when Tommy died, leaving me a young widow with a child to raise. Harder than the years of working double shifts to make ends meet. This was a different kind of pain, not the sharp, clean grief of death, but the messy, complicated anguish of betrayal. My story made the local news, though they were kind enough to keep my name out of the headlines. "Prominent attorney arrested for elder abuse and attempted murder of mother," the Cleveland Plain dealer announced. Reporters called my house until Martha unplugged the phone. Neighbors I'd known for decades suddenly found excuses to walk by, hoping to catch a glimpse of the elderly woman whose son had tried to poison her. I felt like a curiosity, a cautionary tale, the subject of whispered conversations at church coffee hours and grocery store checkout lines. "Did you hear about poor Evelyn Johnson? Such a shame. She raised that boy all by herself after Thomas died. Sacrificed everything for him. And this is how he repays her." The physical effects of whatever Rick had been giving me took time to fade completely. For several weeks, I still experienced dizzy spells and confusion, though they grew less frequent as the drugs worked their way out of my system. Dr. Patel, a geriatrician recommended by the Elder Abuse Unit, confirmed what Martha and I had suspected. I had no cognitive impairment beyond what was normal for someone my age, no dementia, no serious memory issues, just the normal forgetfulness that comes with 72 years of accumulated memories. "Your son was inducing symptoms with those medications. Dr. Patel explained during my first real medical examination in months. The combination of sedatives and other drugs created a condition that mimicked cognitive decline. It's not the first time I've seen this, unfortunately. I wasn't alone in my experience. That was both comforting and horrifying, to know that other children had done this to their parents, that other elderly people had been victimized by those they trusted most. The detective put me in touch with a support group specifically for victims of elder abuse. At first, I resisted going, not wanting to sit in a circle of sad old people sharing stories of mistreatment. But Martha insisted, driving me to the community center herself and waiting in the car while I attended my first meeting. To my surprise, the group wasn't what I'd expected. Yes, there was sadness, but also strength, resilience, even occasional laughter. These weren't just victims, they were survivors. They shared practical advice about recovering from financial exploitation, rebuilding trust, navigating the legal system. More importantly, they understood what I was going through in a way that even Martha, for all her kindness, couldn't. "The hardest part," said Eleanor, an elegant woman in her 80s who'd been fleeced by her grandson, "is accepting that someone you love could do this to you. That's the part that keeps you up at night." She was right. Late at night, when the house was quiet and sleep eluded me, I would replay memories of Rick growing up, searching for signs I might have missed. The child who'd been caught lying about breaking a neighbor's window. The teenager who'd manipulated me into extending his curfew with elaborate stories. The young man who'd charmed his way through life, using his good looks and quick mind to get what he wanted. Had the seeds of his betrayal been there all along? Had I been blind to them, seeing only what I wanted to see? The legal process ground forward with excruciating slowness. There were hearings and delays, motions filed, and depositions taken. Rick had hired Cleveland's most expensive criminal defense attorney, a shark in an Italian suit who specialized in getting wealthy clients out of trouble. He tried every trick in the book, claiming I was indeed suffering from dementia and had imagined the whole thing, suggesting Martha had somehow manipulated me against my son, even hinting that I might have been taking the medications voluntarily and then forgotten. None of it worked. The evidence was too overwhelming. The pills found in Rick's condo. The detailed notes in his own handwriting about dosages and symptoms. The forged deed with my signature that didn't quite match my real one. The financial records showing systematic draining of my accounts. And most damning of all, the testimony of Dr. Pierce, the so-called physician who had crumbled under police questioning and admitted that he wasn't actually treating me for any legitimate condition. He'd struck a plea deal to testify against Rick in exchange for a reduced sentence. Through it all, I attended every court appearance, sitting quietly in the back row, watching my son in his orange jumpsuit as he conferred with his attorney or stared straight ahead, never once looking back at me. I don't know what I was hoping for. Some sign of remorse, perhaps, some flicker of the boy I'd raised. But Rick's face remained a mask, revealing nothing. 3 months after his arrest, as the evidence continued to mount and his defense strategy crumbled, Rick's attorney approached the prosecutor with a plea deal. 10 years for attempted murder with additional sentences for the financial crimes to run concurrently. With good behavior, he could be out in 7. The prosecutor called me personally to discuss the offer. "It's a good deal from our perspective," he explained. "A trial would be long, expensive, and extremely difficult for you emotionally, and there's always the small chance that a jury might be swayed by his attorney's arguments, especially given Mr. Johnson's standing in the community and his appearance." What he meant, though he was too polite to say it directly, was that Rick was handsome, educated, and charming, the kind of defendant juries sometimes couldn't bring themselves to convict despite overwhelming evidence. A white-collar criminal in an expensive suit didn't fit their image of a would-be murderer. "What do you think I should do?" I asked, though I already knew my answer. "It's entirely your decision, Mrs. Johnson," the prosecutor said carefully. "But in my professional opinion, this plea deal serves justice while sparing you the ordeal of a trial, where your son's attorney would try to paint you as confused and unreliable. In the end, I agreed to the plea deal. Not to spare myself, but because I couldn't bear the thought of sitting in a courtroom day after day, watching Rick's attorney try to destroy my credibility, my dignity, my very sanity. The legal system might call me a victim, but I refused to be victimized again. The day Rick accepted the plea was the first time I'd been close enough to actually speak to him since his arrest. As the bailiff led him from the courtroom, I stepped forward. "Rick," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He stopped, finally looking at me directly. I searched his face for some sign of the child I'd known, the baby I'd held in my arms, the boy who'd brought me dandelion bouquets and handmade Mother's Day cards. I found nothing. "Why?" I asked simply. The question that had haunted me for months. For a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Then a small, cold smile touched his lips. "You were never supposed to know," he said, his voice so low only I could hear it. "It would have been peaceful, just like falling asleep. Better than wasting away in some nursing home, which is where you'll end up now." The bailiff tugged at his arm, but Rick wasn't finished. "I gave you everything," he continued, his voice hardening. "My whole life was about making you proud. The right school, the right job, the right image. Perfect Rick, successful Rick, the son who made good on his father's dreams. But it was never enough, was it? Nothing was ever enough for you." I stared at him, shocked by the bitterness in his voice. "I never wanted anything but for you to be happy," I whispered. He laughed, a harsh sound that bore no resemblance to the warm chuckle I remembered. "Happy? I haven't been happy since I was 12 years old. Since Dad died, and you turned me into your project, your second chance, the repository for all your sacrifices and expectations." "That's not true," I protested, tears filling my eyes. "I loved you. I still love you." "Love," he scoffed. "If that's love, I'm better off without it." The bailiff pulled him away then, ending our conversation before I could respond. I stood frozen in place, his words ringing in my ears as he was led away in handcuffs back to the jail where he would await formal sentencing. Was he right? Had my love been a burden to him? Had my sacrifices, meant to give him opportunities I never had, somehow warped him, turned him into this cold, calculating stranger? I couldn't believe it, wouldn't believe it. Every parent makes mistakes, but love isn't one of them. Back at home, I found a letter waiting for me. A thick envelope with the return address of the county jail. Rick's handwriting. For a long moment, I just held it, unsure whether to open it or throw it away. Finally, I took it to the kitchen table and carefully slit the envelope. Inside were pages of precise handwriting, the same neat script I remembered from school permission slips and thank you notes. But the content was nothing like those innocent communications of the past. "Mother," it began. No dear, no term of endearment. Just the formal mother that felt like a slap. What followed was not an apology, but a justification. Rick claimed he'd only been trying to help me, to spare me the indignity of losing my independence as I aged. The medications were to ease my transition, he wrote, to make me comfortable as he took over the burdensome details of managing my affairs. He portrayed himself not as a criminal, but as a dutiful son who perhaps had gone too far in his concern for my welfare. It was manipulative, self-serving, and utterly lacking in genuine remorse. Even now, facing years in prison, he couldn't bring himself to admit what he'd done or take responsibility for his actions. Instead, he ended the letter with a request that I write to the judge before sentencing, asking for leniency, that I, his victim, beg for mercy on behalf of the man who had methodically planned my death. I read the letter twice, then set it aside, not in anger, but in sorrow. The son I'd known and loved was truly gone, if he had ever really existed at all. In his place was this stranger who saw nothing wrong in what he'd done, who could justify attempted murder as an act of care. I didn't write to the judge. I didn't attend the sentencing hearing. I'd said my goodbyes in that brief courthouse encounter, though I hadn't known it at the time. Now it was time to focus on rebuilding my life, reclaiming my finances, securing my home, restoring my health, and finding a way forward in a world that had been fundamentally altered by betrayal. The hardest part was facing the future alone. Not just without Rick. I'd been preparing myself for that natural separation for years as he built his career and eventually, I'd hoped, his own family. But now I faced old age without the comfort of knowing my son would be there for me when I truly needed him, without the hope of grandchildren to brighten my later years, without the family connections that most people take for granted. "You're not alone," Martha reminded me often. "You have me. You have our church family. You have the friends you've made in your support group. Family isn't just blood, Evelyn." She was right, of course. In the months following Rick's sentencing, I discovered strengths and connections I hadn't known I possessed. The ladies from church organized a rotation to drive me to appointments until I felt confident enough to start driving myself again. My support group became a circle of true friends who understood my pain without judgment. Martha's children and grandchildren included me in their holiday celebrations, saving me from the emptiness of spending Christmas alone. And slowly, day by day, I began to heal, not just from the physical effects of the drugs, but from the deeper wounds of betrayal. I started volunteering at a senior center, using my sewing skills to teach classes and repair donated clothing. I joined a water aerobics class at the YMCA, building back the strength that months of Rick's care had stolen from me. I even adopted a cat from the animal shelter, a grumpy orange tabby named Oscar, who seemed as surprised as I was to find himself with a new companion late in life. 6 months after Rick went to prison, I received another letter from him. This one I didn't open, nor the one that came 3 months after that. They sit in a drawer in my desk, sealed and unread. Perhaps someday I'll want to know what they contain. Perhaps not. The choice, at least, is mine to make. My son tried to poison me after promising to take care of me. The day I caught him, I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I chose myself over him. I chose life over family loyalty. I chose truth over comfortable lies. It wasn't the happy ending I'd imagined for my life story, but it was my ending, on my terms. And for now, that would have to be enough. It's been nearly 3 years since that terrible night when I confronted Rick about the pills. 3 years since I watched my only child being led away in handcuffs. 3 years of rebuilding a life I never expected to have, a life without my son in it. People often ask me how I'm doing now, their voices gentle with pity, their eyes searching my face for signs of lingering trauma. I tell them I'm fine, and for the most part, that's true. I've settled into a new normal that might look sad from the outside, but has its own quiet contentment. My little house on Maple Street feels like mine again. I've redecorated a bit. New curtains in the living room, a fresh coat of paint in the kitchen, flowers planted along the front walk. Small changes that help erase the memories of Rick moving through these rooms with his clipboard and pills, assessing and calculating as if I were already gone. The legal matters are finally settled. With the help of a kind attorney from Legal Aid for Seniors, I've recovered most of my savings and secured clear title to my home. The insurance policy that Rick had been so interested in has a new beneficiary now, a scholarship fund at the community college for single parents pursuing education. It seems fitting somehow, a way to honor the struggles Tommy and I faced while ensuring that our money will never go to the son who betrayed us. Physically, I'm stronger than I've been in years. The water aerobics class I joined has become a fixture in my weekly routine, along with a walking group that meets in the park every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, rain or shine. At 75, I'm not breaking any speed records, but I can make it around the lake without stopping now, my cheeks flushed with healthy exertion rather than drug-induced confusion. The good days far outnumber the bad now. There are still moments, of course. A child's laughter that sounds like Rick's did. A glimpse of someone with his profile turning a corner ahead of me. The Father's Day displays in stores that remind me of how we used to celebrate Tommy's memory together. These moments still have the power to knock the wind out of me, to send me home to sit quietly with Oscar on my lap, working through the grief that never quite goes away. I haven't visited Rick in prison. The therapist I started seeing after his arrest says that's perfectly fine, that I don't owe him my presence or forgiveness. Healing doesn't require reconciliation, she told me during one of our sessions. Sometimes the healthiest thing is to maintain the boundary you've established. She's right, I know. And yet, there's a part of me, the mother part, that will never fully die, that wonders how he's doing, whether prison has changed him, if he ever thinks about what he did and truly regrets it. Not the consequences, not getting caught, but the actual betrayal of the most fundamental bond between parent and child. The unopened letters have accumulated in my desk drawer, 6 of them now. Sometimes I take them out and look at them, running my fingers over his familiar handwriting on the envelopes, but I haven't found the courage to read them yet. I'm afraid of what I might find inside. More manipulation, more blame, more of the cold calculation that chilled me to the bone. Or perhaps worse, genuine remorse that would reopen wounds that have finally begun to heal. What surprises me most about this chapter of my life is not the pain, though God knows there's been plenty of that, but the unexpected blessings that have emerged from the ashes of what I thought was my life. Martha, for instance, has become more than a neighbor or even a friend. She's the sister I never had, my constant companion in this late-life adventure neither of us saw coming. We take day trips to the lake, try new recipes together, puzzle over crosswords at her kitchen table while Oscar whines between our ankles. Last Christmas, her family insisted I join their portrait session, positioning me right next to Martha as if I'd always belonged there. Then there's my support group, which has evolved from a circle of fellow victims into something like a social club. We still talk about our experiences, still help newcomers navigate the complex emotions of family betrayal, but we also celebrate birthdays, organize potlucks, and go to movies together. Last month, 4 of us even took a weekend trip to Niagara Falls, my first real vacation in decades. The seniors at the community center where I volunteer have become another unexpected source of joy. I teach sewing classes there twice a week, showing women, and a few brave men, how to hem pants, replace buttons, and even make simple garments from patterns. Miss Evelyn's Stitch Fix, they call it, and the satisfaction of passing on skills that are becoming rare in this disposable age is profound. My story has even helped others, though that was never my intention. After a local newspaper did a feature on elder abuse that mentioned my case, with my permission, I received letters from other seniors who recognized the warning signs in their own lives and sought help before it was too late. The detective who handled my case invited me to speak at a training session for police officers about recognizing elder abuse. Standing at that podium, my knees shaking but my voice steady, I felt something shift inside me, from victim to advocate, from passive recipient of fate to active shaper of my remaining years. Would I change what happened if I could? Of course, I'd give anything to have my real son back. Not the stranger who plotted my death, but the boy who once held my hand crossing streets, who made me motherless cards from construction paper, who called me every Sunday during his college years just to check in. I miss that boy with an ache that never quite subsides. But I can't change the past. None of us can. All we can do is move forward with what we have, find meaning in what remains, and perhaps help others avoid the pitfalls we couldn't see coming. If there's any wisdom I can share from this painful journey, it's this. Love deeply, but keep your eyes open. Trust, but listen to that small voice of doubt when something feels wrong. Ask for help when you need it. Pride can be a deadly companion in old age. And remember that family is both what we're born into and what we create around us through friendship, kindness, and shared experience. Most importantly, know that it's never too late to start over. At 75, I'm not the woman I expected to be. My life hasn't followed the script I imagined when Tommy and I brought our newborn son home from the hospital all those years ago. But it's still my life, still worth living fully, still capable of surprising me with moments of unexpected joy. Last week, I found a bird's nest in the maple tree outside my kitchen window, a perfect circle of twigs and grass, with 3 tiny blue eggs nestled inside. Each morning now, I watch the mother bird as she tends her young, her devotion simple and unwavering. There's a lesson there, I think, about the natural order of things, about what nurturing should look like in its purest form. I don't know if I'll ever understand what went wrong with Rick, what transformed my loving child into someone capable of such calculated cruelty. Perhaps some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only accepted and then eventually released. What I do know is this: I'm still here, still breathing, still creating, still finding reasons to get up each morning and greet the day with curiosity rather than dread. That's a victory of sorts, one I claim not with pride but with quiet gratitude for second chances and the resilience of the human spirit. And that was my story. Now I want to know, where are you all listening from? Comment below and tell me what state you're in. God bless you all. Whether you're in California or Maine, New York or Texas, I hope my story has touched something in you. Not just the painful parts, though those are real and important, but the reminder that we are stronger than we know, more capable of renewal than we might believe. Wherever you are today, whatever struggles you're facing, remember that you're not alone. We're all just walking each other home, as they say, sharing our light when the path gets dark for someone else. Thank you for walking with me for a while today.